Hello and welcome, everyone, to episode 406 of the No Sugarcoating Podcast. I am your host, Amber Romaniuk, and I'm so glad that you're with me today. Today's episode has actually been prompted by questions, inquiries that I get via email, Instagram DMs about working with me when it comes to self-sabotage with food and then the food choices. Many women ask me like, hey, like, I know when you healed your food addiction, you talk about that you cut certain things out. Do you make your clients do that? And I go, no, not necessarily. It really depends on the severity of what's going on with emotional eating, binging, or is it a full-blown food addiction? Some don't have to make any changes with food, and it's really about building awareness with triggers, and others choose on their own to swap certain foods for better quality because they notice that they gain traction to heal more easily. So I'm actually going to break all that down today in this episode. So we're going to go deep into emotional eating binges and how to approach food because it is different for every person, every circumstance, and I'm going to help you understand why. And then we're going to go into emotional eating versus binge eating versus food addiction because they're very different. And depending on the severity of your self-sabotage with food and your relationship with food may dictate the way that you approach food, and that changes as you go. And then getting guidance to help you gain freedom. And why I think that is just such a pivotal part of this is actually getting someone that has been through it themselves, that has the brain of the emotional eater, the food addict, and the binge eater, and why it's so beneficial to consider getting support to help you gain the clarity, the knowledge, the tools, everything that can help you fully gain food and body freedom on your journey. So I'm really excited to dive into that today. Of course, there's a couple of key announcements. So as I've been sharing, I share these episodes on the podcast audio, and then you can also listen on YouTube and watch and see me talk if you want to stare at me. But my YouTube channel is Amber Romaniuk. It's my name, so you can go and subscribe there. I'm also dropping all kinds of other new content on my YouTube now, so come and join me there. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to interact, share your comments below, share your questions, your takeaways, whatever it is that you need. But obviously any things that I talk about will be linked in the description below on YouTube. And of course, if you're listening to the podcast, you can find all the details and all the links for today's episode at amberapproved.ca/podcast/406. So something, a client said to me the other day that I want to share is that we've been working together for about 3 months now. And she came to me with binge eating struggles and like body image insecurities and deep people pleasing, which was fueling her self-sabotage. And she said to me, she's like, oh my goodness, I'm starting to shift. I'm starting to change. I didn't people please the other day. I didn't drink because I didn't want to. I didn't eat that food because I didn't want it. And I didn't feel obligated to eat or consume something to please someone else. She's like, I wasn't hungry. I didn't want anything. Why would I eat if I'm not hungry? Right. And she's just like, it's feeling so good to start to feel what power feels like, to feel what it feels like to make decisions for myself and not decisions based off of worrying about what others are going to think of me if I don't do what they're doing. And to me, I was just like, that is such an aha. That is such a gift that she's starting to have that, and that she's just feeling more free with food in just 3 months. So I just wanted to share that. It's just powerful and profound, the shifting that happens on this journey. So if you're loving what I'm talking about here and you're relating and resonating and you're wanting to reach out and talk about going on a journey together, there are programs available to really help you on this journey. It is a safe space. It is a very gentle journey. We take it at your pace and we take everything one step at a time to build a solid foundation to set you up to heal this for life, to gain full freedom for life, and you're not having to come back and revisit all this again. So you are so welcome if you desire to connect, to go to amberapproved.ca, click the schedule a consultation and book a body freedom consultation if you want. You fill out an intake form, it's $50 USD, and then you get to select your time and we connect for 30 minutes to talk about all the symptoms you're having, why you can't lose weight, the self-sabotage with food, the people-pleasing, the mindset, and so much more. And then I can give you, the programs and we can talk about what path might feel best for you. So just want you to let you know that is available. And I do 12 months, 6 month, 4 month, and then I do have some intro stuff available if you want to just get a taste. So just don't hesitate to reach out via booking a consult or email me at info@amberapproved.ca, and I'm happy to give you more details. Also, I just wanted to announce that all of last year's masterclasses are back online. I've been so busy working behind the scenes to get everything back up. Been changing everything over from one back end to another. So if you want to start with a toe in the water and you want to either learn about the emotional and physical reasons for your cravings, why you have the weight loss blocks and struggles that you do and what's at the root of those blocks of weight loss. You want to learn more about cortisol and adrenal fatigue, hormones, inflammation, building body love, emotional eating, and more. There are a range of multiple different masterclasses available from $77 USD down to $22 USD. And you get lifetime access. And as soon as you sign up, you'll get access to these and get into your learning. There's worksheets, there's bonuses, there's all kind of things. So if you want to focus on one specific topic, you can click the link below in the show notes in YouTube, or you can go to amberfood.ca and just click online programs, and the masterclass banners at the top, and you can do some shopping. But I just wanted to let you know that all of that is back up, and I'm really, really excited. And something else that I'm really excited about too, because I just feel like people are craving intimacy. People are craving vulnerability, hence my whole conversation last week. But I have been so grateful that I've had some of my clients be open to sharing video testimonials so they can really share their client experience of working together and the benefits and, healing their self-sabotage and their hormone health and their ego and so many other things that have benefited them by going on this journey. So if you are curious and you want to hear more from my clients, you can go to my YouTube at Amber Romaniuk and you can watch. There's a couple, Jade and Catherine are up, and then I have more coming. You can also click the success story page on my website and watch them and read through too if you've been curious about what it might be like to work together. So without further ado, let's dive into today's topic. So emotional eating binges and how to approach food choices. So if you've heard my story, you've heard me talk about how I was severely addicted to refined sugar. I was severely addicted to casein, which is the protein found in dairy, especially in high amounts in cheese, that can excite the same part of our brain as heroin. And I was very addicted to gluten, which is the protein found in a lot of wheat products that also can give us a massive dopamine high. Now, it may not give everyone a massive dopamine high, but these were foods for me that would just trigger me into deep, full-blown binge eating, loss of control, eating until I was so full I was sick. And then I would crave these foods so intensively all the time. And it made it really hard for me to gain any traction with my food addiction and my binge eating issues, continuing to try and have moderate amounts of these foods. And so for me, when I was healing my food addiction, because it was so severe, and I'm going to talk about the differences between emotional eating, binge eating, and food addiction today to just maybe help give you some more clarity of where you may be at. But when you are fully addicted to food, and you're trying to not eat certain foods, you're trying to not self-sabotage and fall back into binge eating, for me, it just kept pushing me back in. Going, oh, well, I'm just going to try have a mindful amount of sugar. I'm just going to try keep some cheese in the fridge. I'm just going to have some gluten-free bread or some bread and just make a sandwich. Or I'm just going to have my cashew granola bars in the cupboard and I'll just have one a day. But then if I would get triggered, I would have one cashew granola bar and then I would eat the whole box because I'm well, screw it. I need to get this out of the house. This is just triggering me. And now I just want to eat it all. It's making me crave it. I can't stop thinking about it because I know it's in the house. How many of you can resonate? I know I've had, have had clients who can't keep nut butters in the house and certain candies and things because they just lose control. This is an issue for so many of us when we are first starting to discover we have these emotional connections with food. And for others, nothing phases them and they can have whatever they want in their house. And that's awesome. But for me, that's what was happening. And so it's I'd buy some feta cheese or buy some goat cheese or some mozzarella cheese, right, to have with crackers or whatever it was. And then I would slice up a few pieces and have it. And then I would just get this, I'm oh my God, I want more. And then I would eat the whole block of cheese. I would eat half a loaf of bread. I would eat all the granola bars. I would eat the whole box of cereal. And so for me, my reasoning for going, I feel I'm addicted to food, someone's addicted to alcohol or addicted to drugs. Trying to have moderation of these foods is only keeping me stuck and constantly triggering me to self-sabotage. So I made the decision that what felt best for me after learning about how refined sugar is 10 times more addictive than cocaine, that it was giving me a massive high, a massive dopamine hit. And every time I ate it, I would just want to completely lose control. At the time, I was very vulnerable to my food addiction and my binge eating triggers. I didn't love myself. I didn't have healthy ways to cope. I didn't understand that my blood sugar was also really off. My hormones were really out of whack. My gut health was really off. And all of this was fueling my cravings and making it easier to lose control even more. I don't have any of those issues anymore. We can have whatever we want in the house. Personally choose to not support a lot of big companies and have a lot of crap products in the house because I don't want to give my money to companies that don't support humanity and health, period. People ask, well, why don't you eat this? Why don't you eat this? And it's not because I'm afraid of it. It's not because I'm like, oh, like good food, bad food. It's like, I don't want to give my money to companies that have not good intent in mind for humanity. Why is there all the horrible pesticides and fake dyes and 5 kinds of aspartame and 6 kinds of sugar, XYZ in products that should not have those things? I don't support that. So that's why we choose to not have certain foods in the house. And honestly, now it's to the point where the baking I do and a lot of the cooking I do tastes so much better than what you could buy at the store that I'd rather spend the extra time and just make it myself because it tastes so good. And I love putting a lot of love into my food. And I feel like as you heal your relationship with food, you do gain more of a enjoyment in the kitchen. And then we go to our favorite restaurants and we enjoy the food and I really enjoy it. Right. But I just don't like giving my money to really big companies that I personally feel don't have humanity's greatest good in mind. Vote with your dollars. I'd rather support the local maker, the local farmer, the local whatever, right? So that's my personal choice. We all get to choose. But like I said in my vulnerability episode last week, like I'm not holding anything back. Anyways, so the reasoning behind, I was like, when I started to learn that I had a food addiction, that it wasn't just emotional eating, which I'll go into the differences right away. I realized, wow, I'm heavily addicted to casein. And then I started to read about casein and how it can excite the same part of the brain as heroin. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't feel crazy because I literally start eating cheese and I lose control. I start eating any kind of dairy ice cream and there's sugar and dairy, right? And then there's gluten in some ice creams and MSG, and they do that on purpose to give you the perfect high so that you lose control and you keep eating it. And then we're going to talk more about food. That's coming, but yeah, it's all connected. So as I started learning, and then I read like Grain Brain and some other books, and it just started to make sense to me. I'm like, wow, this is impacting my brain chemistry. This is giving me dopamine highs. It's literally giving me a drug high. I'm continuing to lose control. I'm trying to do this in a moderate amount. It's not working for me. Okay, there must be something else. So then I was like, I noticed on the days where I was able to not lose control with gluten and sugar and dairy, I felt better. My cravings started to subside a bit. I didn't have as much of an urge to binge. And so I thought, you know what, maybe for me, and this is just personal, again, reminding you, I don't make my clients do this. But personally for me, I chose, and it took dozens of attempts, so it didn't happen right away. I lost control so many more times. But I made the personal decision that cutting out gluten, dairy, and sugar for a period of time to help me gain traction and momentum to overcome my food addiction felt very, very right for me and very empowering because I'm like, well, I keep losing control. That's not working. It's kind of like telling an alcoholic, like, well, you can have wine and coolers, but just don't have whiskey and beer. Like, you can't tell an alcoholic that they can have alcohol a few days a week or, have these certain kinds, but not these. Like with alcohol, it's like, you got to stop if you have an issue. And for me, it felt like that, but with food, it was like, if I keep eating this, I don't think I'm going to get anywhere because these foods are literally lighting up the neural pathways in my brain that give me a high. I'm literally addicted to these foods. And then when I started to try and, reduce the amount of intake of these foods, I started going through the drug-like withdrawals, the depressed-like state, the low mood, the cravings, the fatigue, the brain fog, this deep urge to eat them. My frustration, irritability, it was intense. It was intense. And that's how I knew my body was going through drug-like withdrawal. And then I started reading about the symptoms of drug-like withdrawal. I'm like, oh my gosh, these foods were my drugs. And I am literally going through a withdrawal right now. And that's what it felt like for me. And that may not be the case for you. Your issue may not have been as severe as mine. Maybe it is, but I just wanted to reaffirm that because that's why I made that personal choice. And at the end of the day, we all get to make the choices that feel most empowering for us. And at the time, that's what felt most empowering for me. And after the dozens of attempts and failures of trying to really limit the intake, I became successful and my binges started to lessen, and my digestion started to improve. The brain fog started to go away. My cravings started to reduce. And now, as if you've heard my story, you know that then I started though binging on healthy food, just like nut butter and bananas, like 10 bananas in a jar of nut butter, a whole thing of rice pasta and goat cheese. And that's when I obviously really realized this was so much deeper, and there was so many more emotional components, and knowing my triggers and realizing I had this void and I didn't love myself, and I was trying to numb out and distract with food. And I was very insecure and so much of a people pleaser and a perfectionist and the all or nothing mentality. I still hated my body. I still yearned to finally reach that goal weight because I thought that was going to fix everything, even though I knew it never would. But at least I knew what the reducing the intake of the gluten, dairy, and sugar showed me is that these foods are like a drug for me. They're literally making my eyes glaze over when I eat them. I literally get a massive high when I eat them. And then I'd have to eat more of them to get the same high because your taste buds get more numbed and you don't produce as much dopamine. You have to eat more to get the same high, just like drinking or doing drugs. But the clarity it gave me, other than improving some of my symptoms, was, wow, this is so much deeper emotionally. It's not it's the food is part of the issue, but the issue is so much deeper, and the food is only part of what's fueling my self-sabotage. It's these emotional components, the void, the lack of self-love, my fear of feeling my emotions, my lack of coping skills, my insecurities within myself, my ego. These are all parts of me, my heavy programming from that I need to look a certain way. I need to deal with this too, while I actually need to also learn and build awareness around what's triggering me to self-sabotage. We must be willing to learn about our triggers, because how do you ever catch them regardless of what foods you're eating? It doesn't matter. If you don't know what's triggering you and you don't put any time, effort, or awareness into understanding what's triggering you, not a lot changes to help you overcome your self-sabotage with food. So that's when I started, so reducing those foods helped open up to all these other things for me to look at, which to me was very empowering, because then I started working on those things and the binge eating was less, and I was self-sabotaging less on the healthier foods now. And I was writing my triggers down, and I started the self-care routine, and I started catching the negative self-talk, and stopped weighing in all the time, and stopped the diets, and learned how to listen to my body and build mindful eating practice. And obviously all of this evolved over a few years. Now, the beauty of it is when I work with my clients, like some clients are with me for 2, 3, 4 years. Others 6 months to a year, and they're golden and good to go. Don't judge yourself for where you're at on your journey. Everyone's journey takes a different amount of time. But the thing is when you work with somebody who can help you along the way, you calibrate and shift more easily, because you gain the tools, the knowledge, the support, the accountability, the safe space, the love, right? The encouragement when you're having a bad day and you're like, oh, nothing feels like it's going my way. Like, this is what's so great about, getting support. But I had to figure all this out on my own, and obviously for good reason. I just didn't know at the time I was going to be helping incredible women, take their power back with food in their bodies as well at the time. So I wanted to just break that down, because that's why I did that. However, as I healed my relationship with food and I started to feel more confident and comfortable, I remember the first time I had refined sugar, my dad and I went to San Francisco on a trip together, and we went out for dinner and we got dessert, and he got a licorice cheesecake and I got ice cream. I was like, okay, what's this going to feel like? And I ate the ice cream and my teeth started to ache. It was so sickeningly sweet. I ate like half of it and I was like, I have no desire to lose control with this. And I tried his cheesecake and I was like, that was good. But like, I didn't have an urge to like lose control and like, oh, now I've eaten ice cream. Now I have to go and I'm going to go binge at the hotel afterward. Because I had dealt with that all or nothing mentality. I had filled the void. I learned to love myself. And when we fill the void and we learn to love ourselves, and we clear out the all or nothing mentalities with food, we clear out the black and white thinking with food, we learn how to build balance with food, we don't lose control with anything anymore, even if there's refined sugar or gluten or dairy, right? It's like I always talk about, like, I love pierogies. I'm Ukrainian. I love my pierogies at Christmas and Thanksgiving. And my cousin brings homemade pierogies, and I put my beautiful organic sour cream on them, and there's butter and onion and bacon, and it's so good. And like, I enjoy my amount, and then I'm good. I'm satisfied, right? So it's like, now it's fine. And when I started to realize that I could eat these things again and there was no loss of control, and that I felt satisfied, I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting that I'm at this point. Because part of why I held off for a little while is because I needed to build my confidence around that, like I felt safe having them and that I knew I was to a point where I wasn't going to lose control anymore. And that comes at a different time for everyone. Some people don't need to cut anything out and they can just build that confidence. Some people though, it's like baby steps. Again, when your addiction and self-sabotage was as severe as mine was, I had to make the choices that felt most empowering for me. And that's what felt most empowering for me. And it's going to be different for you. But now it just doesn't matter. Like a few weeks ago, someone sent us a box of chocolates and they were just like regular chocolates with like sugar and all the stuff. And like they sat in the house for like 3 or 4 weeks. Like I feel like Phil ate more of them than I did. And it's just, thinking back, and it's fine. Like we can have anything in the house, nut butters, ice cream, it doesn't matter. But the funny thing is I was thinking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like if this was me like 12 years ago, those would have all been gone. Like when certain food things come up, it helps me anchor into deeper gratitude and appreciation for being willing to address the self-sabotage, being honest with myself and giving myself what I needed, which was to cut these foods out for a while so I could heal and really feel confident and clear out all my food fears, right? And to see myself, honor myself through the journey that felt best for me to get to the point where I can have what I want when I want and have balance with nourishing my body with all the beautiful whole foods to support my health and vitality, and also have balance with mindful indulgence. It's so freeing and liberating and empowering. And this is what you get to have too. And this is what I help teach my clients to do. And it's just such a gift, and it's so beautiful to see them do the same. Right. But the journey looks different for each one of us. And until we get into the journey and see where we're at and see where like the severity of your self-sabotage with food is, and see like and not only that, but like, are there certain foods that you're eating that are giving you bloating and pain and fueling your skin issues and fueling high inflammatory markers that are just not making you feel good, right? Because one of the things I learned as I was changing the way I was eating is there was a beautiful alternative for everything. I started to learn about gluten-free flours for baking. I found dairy-free alternatives that I really loved. And we love the goat products. Like I use goat butter a lot, and the mozzarella goat cheese and the soft goat cheese and the goat feta. Like I love that stuff. We just feel better personally, not having a lot of gluten and dairy and sugar. Like we just feel better. Our vibrations are higher. We have better mental clarity, but each person to their own. Each person eats differently. But I just started to create all these recipes and new creations with these new ingredients. And I found it gave me a whole new creative outlook, helped me fall in love with food again. I felt really confident that I can make all these things and not miss out on anything. And then I didn't feel deprived or like I was restricted at all while I was trying to heal my relationship with food. And a lot of those recipes have just stuck because they're so good. Like when I make the banana strawberry chocolate chip loaf, and we have company over, they're like, this is refined sugar free and gluten free. And they're like, no way, like this is so good. And it's just funny, right? Because people don't realize that this is whole foods. They're like, oh, no, I don't want any, like I need to watch my waist. I'm like, this literally is whole foods, like have some, right? Because people think it's just full of junk ingredients, but when they come over to our house, it never is, right? So everyone gets to enjoy their dessert. They don't have to feel guilty. I mean, we shouldn't feel guilty anyway, everything in moderation. But it's just opened up a whole new creative outlet for recipe creation. And I wrote my cookbook and like just trying all these different ingredients. So for me, it was a really positive experience, the way that my journey unfolded. So I just wanted to share a bit more about that to give you guys a little deeper of an explanation, because I often get the question around why I cut certain foods out, and like, isn't that restrictive? Isn't that only gonna like inhibit your ability to heal your relationship with food? And it didn't for me, and it doesn't for most. It just depends on the severity of where we're at. So let me give some examples of client stuff, right? So I'd say it's like 40%, 40%, 20%. So I would say 40% of my clients, we get into discussing, right? We get on the journey together and they're like, okay, I'm very aware that I have really intense sugar cravings, really intense salt cravings, really intense cravings for like cheeses or pastas or breads. And they say like, once I start eating these foods, I can't stop. I lose control. And then it makes me really bloated and I feel brain fogged and makes my cravings worse. And the more we indulge in these foods, when we have the self-sabotage with food, the more out of whack our body gets, the more cravings, the more fatigue, the more bloated, the more it amplifies our symptoms, our hormone issues. And this can give us bigger cravings and more easily trigger us to self-sabotage. So part of what we start talking about is like, okay, well, what do you think is going to help you feel more confident gaining traction with your relationship with food while you learn about your triggers and start catching them and start like learning how to give yourself what you really need instead. And so we start talking about food. What I find for a lot of my clients when we start first working together is they're not eating enough protein and fat. And if we're not eating enough protein and fat, that fuels blood sugar surges, it fuels cravings. We don't feel satiated, and then it makes it easier to overeat. So what we do is we actually start adding in more nourishing foods that are going to help regulate their blood sugar and keep them satiated. And that helps lessen the desire to overeat or emotionally eat. We start building mindful eating practices so that you're emotionally and physically satiated with your food, that you're aware of what it feels like when you're full, and then you can stop. And as you do this, there's less urge to want to overeat, to eat later on because you're satiated and satisfied. So whilst we're starting to gain awareness around triggers, starting to integrate tools and coaching on the ego and the triggers and the all or nothing mentality and what's fueling the self-sabotage, we're also really improving your nourishment with just small changes as we go. And obviously, as we do this, I say, how does this feel? Does this feel good for you? Is this too much? Is this too little? What? Tell me. And then I take that feedback and we adjust it to what the client wants. So if you're curious about that. Now, I do have some clients who there's a fear around eating fat. There's a fear around eating more. There's fears around that because you've been used to being in calorie counting, you're using apps, you feel you can only eat a certain amount. So if those kinds of things are going on, I'm very mindful and very gentle and compassionate to us making small changes that feel good for you, because I don't want to say you have to make these changes and then you shut down and not show up. Right. So we need to be very mindful of this vulnerability and the delicate nature of the circumstance into how you feel, the food fears you have, the programming you have, because it's different for everyone. So regardless of where you're at, if you have food fears, if you're tightly gripping on to calorie counting apps and eating a certain amount of calories a day, we just baby step making those changes, right? While we work on helping you catch the triggers. Because as you start gaining traction with less emotional eating, less binges, you start to build more confidence and trust. And it helps you feel the desire to want to take better care of yourself. And as you start eating more regularly and eating mindfully and integrating the missing vital nutrients from your food, you start to have more energy, your cravings reduce, your blood sugar gets better, your PMS symptoms start resolving, your cycle is more tolerable, you sleep better, your retention starts to reduce, you start to release protection, and you're like, oh, this is actually working. Wow. Like all the old programming I received around don't eat fat, it's bad, or don't eat carbs, they're bad, or don't eat whatever, it's bad. Like that's actually false. My body actually wants this. Some women that I have are fully plant-based and they can eat that way forever. Some of my clients start craving meat and animal products, and they on their own terms start adding them back in. I never make people change the way they want to eat. However, I will say, right, like, okay, like if you have major thyroid issues and major gut issues, eating a fully raw diet may actually be making things worse. And it may be throwing your blood sugar off and fueling your urges to binge and overeat, because it's a lot of carbohydrate. And if you don't have enough protein and fat, it can fuel binging more easily. And I know I went through that. I went vegan, I went raw. And when I did that, it made my binging worse. It made my gut health worse. I gained weight really easily. Now, the key is that we look at your unique circumstance and we work with what we've got. But I like to just mention those things because they can have an impact. But I get the ethics of like certain things, and that's done in a way that feels good for you, right? So everything is really catered to what's going on for you. It's not a one size fits all, and I think that's the best way to do it, because that's how you heal. Anyways, so 40% are in the case where they're like, I'm craving these foods really bad, I'm continuing to lose control. And they're like, I feel what would be best is if I actually, can we talk about alternatives? Or can you tell me what natural sugars, what products with more natural sugars? Can we talk about dairy? Maybe dairy's the issue for them. And they're like, I get so bloated. I just want to eat the whole block of cheese. I'm addicted to ice cream. And so we start talking about dairy-free alternatives. So nothing is ever restricted truly, because I've literally gained such a catalog of recipes of food product alternatives that there's no restriction. It's literally, oh, why don't you try swapping your sugar for coconut sugar or stevia or monk fruit or real raw honey? And as they start doing this, they notice they don't get the same high. They don't want to lose control. They can start having moderate amounts, and that helps them feel confident. So the whole goal is as we're, working on this journey together, I want to help you build more confidence and trust in yourself and that you can have a healthy relationship with food. And so we want to integrate changes that are going to help you build that. So if you're a part of that 40% that's like, what helps me feel more confident is swapping some of these refined products for better alternatives. So I don't get the same dopamine highs. And then that, then I'm not losing control because I'm not chasing a dopamine high all the time. Wow. And my bloating's less and my brain fog is less and I have more energy. And because I have more energy, I'm less triggered to binge. Great. Then we can take that route and I can give you all the recipes and all the food product recommendations. And we go really slow. It's like, okay, this month, why don't we just work on like, what's the most, intense thing that you're worried you're going to lose control with? Okay, it's sugar. Let's work on like bringing in alternatives. Here's alternative recipes. Give me your recipes. We can swap the ingredients. It's so easy, right? So that's the kind of stuff we can do. And we just pick away at it. And if you're like, that I feel like I don't have an issue with dairy. It doesn't feel like it makes me bloated. I don't lose control. It's like, okay, that's fine. Let's just make sure you're doing, if you're having yogurt with your breakfast, that we add some fat to it so that it's good for your blood sugar, right? So that's the way that it's approached. But you're always given something to swap. It's never like, just cut this out. That can fuel a restriction and that can fuel rebellion and self-sabotage. We don't do elimination diets. I'm not going, you have to cut out these 50 foods. I find a lot of women will come to me that have been told that and they're so overwhelmed and they're so intimidated. And then they're just staying in binge eating and upset because they know it's fueling their physical symptoms. We go, let's pull back on these restrictive diets and protocols. I actually don't want you to do that. Let's like add more things in. So if we're adding more in and we're not taking out, the ego doesn't rebel because it's the ego that's then telling you to rebel if you feel restricted. But if there's no restriction, then you're good. So there's that 40% that they do actually feel more confident for a period of time, reducing their intake, going with the swaps. And then as they overcome the self-sabotage with food, they feel more confident and then they can eat more of them again. And they're like, oh my gosh, Amber, my celebration this week is I went to a barbecue last week and I had ice cream cake. I had a cookie, I had a donut and I enjoyed it. And it was really good. And I just had one, or I had like my two and I felt satiated and I didn't lose control and I didn't go home after and I wasn't guilty. That's power. And then they start seeing how they can have these things, right? Because they've built more confidence and they've built more power and more trust in themselves. And they have the tools to navigate food. So now it's no longer the all or nothing triggering or like, oh my God, I ate that, screw it, the day is ruined. Like we clear out all that old negative chatter. When we bring in, it's safe for me to have mindful indulgence. It's safe for me to have balance. But the balance comes as you heal the mind and the body and like all these things I've been talking about today. There's phases and layers. It happens at a different time for everyone. So the next 40% of my clients, I would say, are in the realm where it's not necessarily that they're losing control with these foods. And fast food is another one, right? Like I used to lose control with fast food. There is this middle ground where it's like, I eat this and I want to eat more, but maybe you're not eating until you're so full, you're sick, or you might be. Or maybe for you, it's like, it's just sugar or it's just fast food that it feels like your nemesis. So then we can talk about a bit of like alternatives or we can go, okay, like for you, what's really important for us to focus on is really getting to know your triggers, making sure your blood sugar is regulated, that you're eating regularly through the day. And as we make those changes, they can keep having mindful amounts of the food and the guilt goes away really easily. And they feel they can eat a bit and it doesn't trigger like just then eating mindlessly through the rest of the day. So maybe we make a few small changes with food, right? And make sure that you're eating a lot of really nourishing things. But when we're not in full-blown food addiction, you may not necessarily have to make a lot of swaps. Now with this 40%, where there's exception to the rule, is if you are eating dairy regularly and you're eating gluten regularly, you're eating sugar regularly or whatever your thing is, and it's giving you a lot of bloating, it's giving you a lot of gas, it's making your skin issues worse, it's giving you the migraines, it's really impacting your mood and your mental health, it's making your cramps worse and your cycle, right? It's fueling really elevated inflammation, high C-reactive protein, which is the inflammatory marker that I see high for a lot of women. And when that gets really high, it can really cause the body to hang on to protection easily and feel really hard to let go of it. And this can also raise cortisol levels and mess with your thyroid. So this is where it's like, okay, let's have a conversation. Like what feels like the middle ground for you? Knowing you have this inflammation, knowing this inflammation is fueled by some of these foods. If we have too much of it, we just need to find the happy medium for what your body can tolerate. And then, we can bring in some swaps if you want. You can have these foods, it seems like your body is tolerating having this, X days a week or whatever, right? But we take it at the pace that feels good for you. And we get to know your body as we go. And then we find that like beautiful rhythm and balance that works for you. So maybe for you, it is actually that as we go, you on your own, you're like, you know what, I'm going to just do a month and like swap my dairy yogurt for goat and coconut yogurt and just see if I notice the difference. And then when we have our session and I'm like, hey, how's your digestion? Any bloating, gas? How's your bowels? You're like, holy crap. I didn't even realize this is the first few weeks I haven't been bloated. And now you're like, maybe the dairy was causing my bloating. Or wow, okay, we've just gotten your thyroid test results back. Wow, your thyroid's really underactive, your inflammation's really high. Are you open to like doing a little bit less, of whatever foods we think are contributing and swapping them, right? And then you start to feel so much better. And you're like, wow, these foods are having an impact. But this is the beauty. As we go through this process, you heal your relationship with food. That takes so much stress off the body. We reduce the inflammation. We balance your gut. We balance your hormones, right? You learn to love yourself. You take your power back. Your nervous system regulates. You learn to manage your ego. All of these beautiful shifts are happening. Your cravings go away. Guess what? I find a lot of my clients can tolerate having mindful amounts of whatever they want, but they also have like this baseline of knowing like, I'm good with this much, but if I start having too much of it, then I don't feel good anymore. Because let's face it, to be honest with you, like having too much processed food, we're not going to feel good, period. We're not meant to eat all this processed food made in a lab. We're meant to eat more from nature. So we just want to find the balance that works for you. And that's going to look different for everyone. And then there's the 20% of my clients that don't have to change really anything with their food. But I do find that is more of a rarity where we don't have to really change anything and that there's not really a lot of sabotage going on. It's usually there's more. And part of the reason of that is because there's literally a deficiency with serotonin and dopamine. Those are the mood boosting neurotransmitters and hormones that help boost your mood and keep you in a steady, happy mood. And I found this for me, and I find this with a lot of my clients who have low dopamine and serotonin, or one of them. And if they're really low, you're of a higher likelihood to go into addictive like tendencies or to chase dopamine highs with food, right? Processed sugars, fast foods, wheat, dairy, right? Baked goods, pizzas, pasta, stuff like that. Or you're chasing the dopamine hit because you're people pleasing and you're trying to do everything for everyone else. And then you're waiting for validation from them. So this is where we can do neurotransmitter testing and see where your serotonin and dopamine are at and work on those. But we want to heal your relationship with food, because once you do, you have this detachment with food. You're like, I love food. I love the taste of it. I love making it. I love the variety of it. I love trying new things. But what happens is you eat for physical nourishment and enjoyment, and you no longer hurt your body with food. You can enjoy a celebration. You can enjoy your favorite ice cream in the summer. You go on a holiday, you want to have a beautiful glass of wine in this beautiful dish that you can't get anywhere else. You enjoy it, you savor it, you're grateful for it. It's joy. And then when you're finished that, you also look forward to caring for yourself and just moving on, and there's no guilt. And to me, that's just freedom. But part of the reason we chase these dopamine highs and we crave these foods and we become addicted to them is because we have low dopamine and serotonin. And how that happens is poor gut health, eating too much processed food, lots of sugar suppresses our dopamine. Inflammation suppresses dopamine and serotonin. Poor gut health suppresses serotonin. Not enough sunlight, right? All kinds of chemicals in our products that we're putting on our body. All these things can inhibit and impact our brain chemistry and our neurotransmitters. So this is where, it's really specific to each person. Because my serotonin and dopamine were so low, I had such a massive food addiction because I was so insecure and I had such a loathing toward my body. The desire to suppress and numb was just so big. And I know it's not for all of you. So it just really depends on your circumstance, and what's going on for you. So now let's talk a bit about emotional eating versus binge eating versus food addiction. So emotional eating can have different spectrums, right? So I always say emotional eating is eating for any reason other than physical nourishment. So if you are sad and then you decide to eat because you're sad or you're bored or you had a bad day and now you want a reward, or you are like, okay, if I'm upset, I eat like half a chocolate bar or 4 pieces of chocolate, right? If you're using food to cope or numb or distract at all, that is emotional eating. And for some of you, it may be like 4 pieces of chocolate. But if you feel guilt afterward, you're eating because it's emotional, you're craving the food and now you need to give into it. You've had a bad day and you're justifying reward. You're justifying why it's going to make you feel better. Or, the more you eat the food, the more you want to eat the food. These are all signs of emotional eating. right? Versus physical nourishment is like, I am physically hungry. I'm getting a hunger signal. My stomach is growling. I haven't eaten in a few hours. My blood sugar is dropping. I'm getting hangry. Completely different, right? So emotional eating can be just a small amount of food that you're eating. And then emotional eating can be, oh, well, I had one donut, so I might as well just eat whatever I want for the rest of the day. And that starts to feel that all or nothing mentality. And maybe you're not overeating to the point where you're sick, but now you're just like, screw it, I'm just going to eat whatever I want for the rest of the day. I'm not going to care because I made mindless choices. So where we start to get into binge eating is now we're getting into the loss of control. Binge is like, I'm binging through the whole chocolate bar. I'm binging through the whole pint of ice cream. I'm binging through the whole bag of chips. And I'm eating until I'm very full or uncomfortable, or I'm eating until I'm so full I'm sick. So it's really a loss of control. I've started, now I can't stop until I finish this because I need to get this out of the house because I don't want to be tempted tomorrow. It is I'm not going to have this for a while because I'm going to get back on my diet tomorrow. So I better eat as much as I can today. Right. Or, I started with this. What else do I have in the house? Screw it. I'm going to just eat whatever I want until I'm so full I'm sick. It's like the numbing, the suppressing, the distracting, the hurt. There's a lot of hurt inside when we do this. And then for some, there's the step further, which is the full lack of responsibility, which is the binge and then the purge. So when we binge and then we feel the need to purge because we think, oh, if I purge, I won't gain weight. We're in a full lack of ownership for what we just did. And it doesn't fix anything. It's a very destructive act on the body to purge. I went through that and I started to realize, wow, I've been justifying that if I binge, I can just purge and then it won't matter, but it was hurting my body, was feeling more inflammation. It could have caused heart issues if I didn't stop, like all these health issues I could have created if I didn't take responsibility. I'm like, if I binge, I need to own it and I need to feel it because it's just too easy to purge and then go, whatever, doesn't matter. Now I'm empty again. Now I can binge more. It was making the issue worse. So this is where we need to, work on catching and taking responsibility and ownership. I've helped a lot of women stop purging and binging, of course. And we have to it's a whole other conversation, but like there's the mindset, the pathways, and the ownership that we must be willing to take. But there's this loss of control. Now with food addiction is a full-blown obsession with food. You're either obsessing over and planning your next binge while you're binging, you're obsessing over your diet, having such significant control with your food, the calorie counting, the apps, the meal planning. I need to stick to my meal plan. I have to be perfect with food. Or you're just completely losing control with food and you're always thinking about it. Planning your next meal, planning your next week, obsessing about the next restaurant visit, right? It's just, you can't stop thinking about food, whether it's a restriction of or an excess consumption. And you're using it to cope, numb, distract. You're eating until you're so full, you're sick. Usually it's very tied to the binge eating part. And it's like, there's just certain foods, you're going to eat them and you can't stop. You lose control. You have no control. You can't be in a room with these foods or you're going to overeat them. So then you start to dread going to certain people's houses, or you start dreading Christmas and holidays because you're like, it's such a vulnerable time of year. I just want to lock myself in my house because I don't want to lose control again. Like this is full-blown food addiction. You have massive dopamine highs when you eat these foods. You need to keep eating more of them to get the same high. This is really where I sat. I was emotionally eating, binging, and it just evolved into a whole full-blown food addiction where I just was in this complete loss of control all the time, trying to grasp control with diets, restriction, meal plans, eating styles, not realizing this is so much deeper. And so this is where I really realized, wow, like I am so obsessed with food because I'm so obsessed with trying to look a certain way and I'm trying to control the food. And so with the food addiction, it's like, you wouldn't tell an alcoholic, like I was saying earlier, oh, well, don't have whiskey and beer, but you can have wine and coolers, right? With alcohol, like you want to overcome alcoholism, there is a component of stopping drinking, but we can't quit eating. And I think that's where people, it can be really hard. Cause like, I can't quit eating. I don't just stop going to a bar or a lounge, right? Like, and I know it's so much more than that with alcoholism. It's similar. There's a void, there's a lack of self-love, we're numbing pain. Like there's so much there too. And if you're dealing with that, I'm just sending you a lot of love. And sugar and alcohol are only one molecule different. And I've had a lot of clients who quit alcohol who start binge eating and they start eating a lot of sugar, a lot of carbs, etc., because just quitting the alcohol didn't fix the self-sabotage. And so I guess that's my other point, is just cutting out certain foods is not going to help you heal your relationship with food, because it's an emotional journey. And there's physical imbalances like blood sugar issues, gut flora issues, hormone imbalances, inflammatory imbalances that will give you bigger cravings, fuel your self-sabotage with food. And then there's the lack of self-love, the void, the all or nothing mentality, the people pleasing, the body image issues, the chasing the weight, the diet addictions, the diet mentalities, the food fears, the ego mindset, that are all part of this that we must be willing to address as well. And so regardless of the level of emotional eating, binging, or food addiction that you may be in, it's important for us to understand that certain foods will amplify and make the loss of control worse. The gluten, the casein, the sugar, the MSG, the aspartame, right? Things that are heavily manipulated in a lab, that are really cheap, that are put into these food products. They really can make us lose control more easily. So this is where I find, like I've been saying, each approach is different. Each person is going to take this journey differently, but getting guidance to help you gain freedom can be one of the most like life-changing breakthrough choices that you make. So this is where, maybe you've gained more clarity today of where you're at on the spectrum, or maybe this has helped give you more insight into the approach that I take with my clients. And it's very different for each person. And it's really taken at a pace that feels good for you. And we make the changes that are going to accommodate your health symptoms, your current state, your food addiction, your binge eating, your emotional eating state, wherever you're at. And then we make changes as we go. It's layer by layer. We don't do it all at once. One layer is dealt with and then we deal with the next one. So if now you're feeling called to want to reach out and have a conversation about working together, you can go to amberapproved.ca, book a 30-minute body freedom call. You can click the link in the show notes at amberapproved.ca/podcast/406, or just click below if you're watching on YouTube and you want to connect. I'm happy to have a conversation with you and explore the different levels of the journey, whether it's one-on-one, you want to self-study, right? There's lots of things available. And I'm happy to give you all the details so you can make the most empowering decision for you. Reach out to someone you feel resonant with. I want you to get the help that you need, because it took me 5 or 6 years to really heal this. My clients do it in 6 months, 1 year, 2, 3 years, some worked longer, but what I find with the women that come and work longer with me is there's so much inflammation. The hormone imbalances are so big, or maybe they have unexpected, intensive life circumstances that come up while we're working together. And they find that the support with the mindset, the ego, etc., is really helpful and beneficial for them, even though they're not binging anymore. And they want that support as they're going through whatever they are with their family, their kids, their work, etc., because the ego is the ego and I can help you navigate that. But be willing to have an open mind and take a different approach. Be willing to have support to overcome the diet mentalities and the food fears, and to, take a different look, a different perception, try something different on, because it may be exactly what you need to help you gain freedom. Now, of course, as you're guided, one thing I love about doing the work that I do is I get to help you understand why you have the triggers that you do. We break down your triggers. The more awareness you have, the more you can catch them and shift them. We make little plans and go, okay, if this trigger comes up, these are things you can try to catch it, right? If for you a trigger is traveling and you find you lose control on your trips, well, let's talk about things you can implement to prevent losing control, and you can have balance, right? Let's talk about, how your hormone imbalances are fueling your self-sabotage. Let's talk about the self-love piece and that void. Let's talk about your inner child, whatever it is. We get to really go deep and get very specific with your needs. And if it's things like you're not eating enough protein, you're not eating enough fat, let's build up your food courage and have you, fall in love with food in your body, and have you step into this level of freedom, power that you deserve to have with your body. It opens up your life. Life is just so much more enjoyable when you're not fighting with your body and food. It is so freeing. So let's take a moment, and I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to envision what it could feel like for you if you didn't have any more cravings for sugar or salt or potato chips or fast food or pizza or whatever it is. No cravings. If your bloating started to settle down, imagine how it would feel if you had a stressor come up, you felt lonely, you had a negative interaction at work, You had a body image trigger come up and you didn't sabotage with food. And instead you're like, oh, there's a trigger. But now that I know what I'm feeling, this is what I want to give myself instead. How would that feel? How would it feel if you could eat ice cream or eat some chips or eat your favorite food and just enjoy a mindful amount and feel satisfied and then move on? No guilt, no shame, no loss of control, just moving on. And how would it feel to have the PMS go away, the menopause symptoms, to help your body feel safe? And as you feel safer, as you learn to love yourself, you feel more confident, you feel more power. The protection comes off and you don't have to restrict. You don't have to do crazy exercise you hate. You can move your body mindfully. You can rest and honor your body, and you don't have to do anything you don't want. How does it feel? How does it feel to think about eating for physical nourishment, enjoying your food, and just then being detached? No more binges, no more restriction, no more diets, stopping when you're full, knowing how to listen to your body and give her what she wants. How does that feel? And how would it feel to get to that place and then just see your life light up even more than it already is? Your relationships improve and get better with your relationship with your spouse. You get into a loving relationship. You're passing better habits on to your kids. Your career is exploding. You're making more money. Your business is thriving. You feel more light. You feel more light. You don't hold back living your life anymore because you're not worried about your body and your weight and your insecurities. You go on the trips. You are social. You put yourself out there. Let that sink in for a minute of the freedom available, the joy, the happiness, the peace with yourself, the peace of mind with your body and food. You get to have this. This is what I want for you. So if you want to reach out, amberapproved.ca, you can schedule a consultation or click the link in the show notes, email me. Otherwise, info@amberapproved.ca. I'm happy to talk to you about this, but food for thought, literally. Okay. So I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you want if you're like, wow, I'm new to this, where can I start? You can go to amberapproved.ca, take the free emotional eating quiz. All the masterclasses are there. You can read more about body freedom and the approach that I take. Everything is available at amberapproved.ca. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm sending you all so much love. I'm cheering you on. I can't wait to connect with those of you that are ready to come forth and explore going on this journey together and creating the food and body freedom. I'm cheering you on. And as I always say, there's no better time than the present to take action on your health and take action to creating food and body freedom for you. So take action now. Have a beautiful day, a great week, and I will look forward to sharing a whole new episode with all of you beautiful souls next Sunday. Take care.